Okay, so welcome everyone to PMIP Wings number 7. It's the 19th of September, and we have the pleasure to host a presentation by Qiong Zhang on forced and unforced multi-centennial variability, a topic that's quite dear to my heart. So my name is Qiong Zhang, and on behalf of the Wings team, I'm really happy to present this. We will have Qiong's presentation now, followed by a discussion, and later a further discussion amongst the community on fast-track experiments for CMIP 7. And just a few words about Qiong. She's a professor in paleoclimate modeling at the Department of Physical Geography at Stockholm University, using in particular the Earth system model EC Earth, so a model of rather high complexity and state-of-the-art Earth system model for paleoclimate simulation. And we're really happy to have you here today. Qiong, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kira, for the introduction. And I also very happy to have this opportunity to report you guys some our recent work on this multi-centennial variability. Actually, we have been doing this invest this variability for a few years, and now gradually gain some knowledge about this. So I think that's is also a good opportunity to present here, maybe also get some feedbacks, also new ideas on this topic. So let's see that. Yes. So it's actually, I might talk quite a lot different aspects, but I will keep short because I only have, like you said, 20 to 25 minutes. So this is the outline. I will start with the motivation, then give you some evidence that we see this variability in the forced and unforced simulations, and also some investigation on this mechanism, why this variability exists or seen in our simulations. Also some sensitivity experiment to see that if it's climate state dependent or independent. In the end, I also will see some implications for potential bias in estimating this equilibrium climate sensitivity when consider this multi-centennial variability. Start with the motivation. Actually, this is something that we are doing a few years ago. We still focus on different PMIP simulations, and at that time we even didn't start the transient Holocene simulation yet. But when we prepare these CMIP 6 simulations for all this, you are running climate model, you know that we first need to run a spin up to let this PI control reach equilibrium. But our EC Earth 3 standard resolution seems never reach the equilibrium. It's have this variability up and down all the time. It's very scary that when our colleague Klaus Weiss presented this left one, that in 2019 EC Earth meeting, we say, okay, this is something very strange, because before, usually we only just run maybe maximum 1,000 years, but usually a few hundred years, maybe we don't see this. And then after that when I run this low resolution, we say the same thing. You could see this amplitude can be 0.6, 0.7 degrees. And we know that even the CO2-driven warming from pre-industrial to now is also around 0.8 degrees. So it's quite large. And then it's also very scary for the modeling groups. We want to maybe suppress this or try to see if this is our model bias or it also exists in other models. So we have these questions after the meeting, that is this oscillation really exists in the climate system, or is a bias? So we need to maybe look for the proxy data for some evidence to see this is really exists in the system, or if it's inside the system, and then we want to know what's the mechanism, what caused this multi-centennial oscillation. So there's also a bunch of other models also run this very long PI control simulation that's seen in the already published in 2019 that FAMS that these are the PI control. You see that some model even have this 5,000 years long. So we also took a look at these other control simulations. We see the same thing, that some models also show very strong multi-centennial variability especially those very long ones. And of course, the different model have a different behavior, but all have this up and down, this centennial to multi-centennial variabilities. And if we look at the spectrum, that also shows, actually, it's also exceeded the significant test. It's the significant multi-centennial variability in all these control runs. So then we have this motivation. We try to understand, okay, if also all the models show this, it's not only the problem in our model, then what about the data? So we want to look at the observational data. Unfortunately, for the instrumental data, we don't have that long record. We only have like maximum 150 years back. And the longest is the Central England temperature record. It has about 1,000 years. So then we also have other proxy data during the last millennium in Greenland or Iceland, all these records. So we had a look, and if we just plot all this variability, we also could see this variability. Even this Central England temperature, it also shows this about 100 years up to 200 years is oscillation. Further, we also looked at the database for the temperature 12K and also the Arctic this database. Based on these two databases, we screened 120 records all over the globe, and you could see that most data are abundant in the North Hemisphere, not that many in the South Ocean, but there's some data in the Antarctic also. So we just looked at all this and did all the spectral analysis, and we try to figure out if we can see all this multi-centennial variability in all these proxy data. Then again, that we see that, of course, this is a very trivial work that you look at different records, and also there's terrestrial records, marine records. So we separate them or combine them all together, they all show this. Of course, they have different period and different amplitude, but they all show this kind of multi-centennial oscillations in this data. So then further, because of its very good organization in PMIP, there's quite a few Holocene transient run is also available that we also collected the 9 transient simulations, transient simulation from 9 models, and also show all the models show this kind of multi-centennial variability. Again, you also could see this model have the different behaviors. Even their global mean temperature is also different. Some model shows cold, some model, like our model, is quite warm. But for the variability, all the model also show similar behavior. And if we do the spectrum, we could see that for the Holocene global mean temperature, because Holocene run is forced, because we have a different force in there, not like the control run. And when it's forced, then we see this variability period. I mean, in average, it shows 100 to 100 years variability, and also more significant in the model than in the proxy. And if you look at these left ones, that the proxy is quite flat and the amplitude also smaller than the models. And then if we look at the different latitude band, it's all pointed to the northern high latitude. See, this 100, 200 years variability actually most evident at the northern high latitude. That's actually eventually point to the MOC. So, and all these Holocene transient simulations, some of them also provided the single forcing simulations. That's we also have the opportunity to look at how the forcing impact this multi-centennial variability. So we do see that actually the solar irradiance or volcanic eruption impact the variability signal, but none of them to be the dominant ones. That if none of them, I mean, is the dominant ones that drive this variability. And for example, in some of them, some simulations like the Hadley CM model, like Peter's run, that we also see that volcanic eruption have a larger impact on this on multi-decade variability than solar irradiance. Here is a different time scale. So now we're quite certain, it seems that this is an inherent variability inside the climate system. After all this analysis, we also had some discussions, but we didn't do any mechanism study in this paper, in this KSR paper, but we did something later on. Because for this mechanism, where does this multi-centennial variability come from? If we look into the literature, there's already some studies. But if we just classify all these opinions, that we could see that there are 3 different proposals. The earlier one that proposed, it comes from the Southern Ocean. So it's a Southern Ocean origin. And then the salinity anomaly in the Southern Ocean will gradually propagate to northward. And then its travel time is about 150 years or 200 years. So this is have been presented already maybe 20 years, 10 years ago. And then recently there's IPSR model and also our ECS model, but another group that also proposed that it might be due to the Arctic sea ice. So it's Arctic origin. So this is also one mechanism that proposed. And then for our analysis and very thorough diagnostic, also together with our colleagues in China, that we believe that we thought this is actually is a self-sustaining variability inside the North Atlantic itself. So that's why we just show this diagnostic and also propose this variabilities mechanism is distributed to the salinity advection and vertical mixing feedback with mechanisms in the subtropical and subpolar North Atlantic. Because from this animation, you could see actually these cycles or these variabilities is just active in this region, but not go beyond to the South Ocean. So of course, this is only one result. It might be different in other models. And also if we think if the sea ice is the driver, then this variability might disappear if you don't have sea ice. So we also did the sensitivity experiment in the high CO2 simulation. So we compared this different CO2 like PI level and then present day level and also double CO2 level. Then we look at the MOX, this behavior also in this 2000 years simulation. We see that this oscillation very, very strong in PI controlled or 280 ppm, and then it become weaker or amplitude become smaller, and also the period become longer in the when you have the warmer climate. But we still see this variability is still there. It didn't disappear. So we still believe this Arctic sea ice can't be the main driver. It's still we think this self-sustained mechanism still works in a warmer climate, and also it means this kind of variability is independent of the climate state. So that is also comes to another question, that because usually when we do climate change or we see that even sensitivity experiment, we always maybe taking 50 years average minus PI control, or 100 years or 150 years. And also before this 150 years usually used for this estimate the climate sensitivity. But now when we see this multi-centennial variability, because this kind of oscillation can be beyond 150 years, it can be 200 years or 300 years. So now the question is if this 150-year simulation effective or good to in estimating this ECS, if we also consider this multi-centennial variability. So we also did some tests on this. We still use our 3 high CO2, different CO2 level simulations. We just try to estimate this ECS, because we see that when you have the different CO2 level, actually the oscillation changes and also the period changes. So this is estimated the global mean temperature change that in 400 ppm or double CO2 relative to the PI control CO2 level. And we could see that especially for the double CO2, because this is usually what we used for estimate the ECS. And we could see if you look at the sampling length, if you have the short length, then it's quite large fluctuation. And especially if it's less than 150 years, you could see that fluctuation can be large. Sometimes very large, sometimes it's smaller. So it has some fluctuations there. So, but when you have enough longer enough simulations, then it's gradually quite nice, and also the bias will be decreased. We also looked at for the different latitude and see this where the bias will be the largest, and also as expected, the largest is still in the higher latitude. This blue line is for example, for the North Hemisphere high latitude, north of 60, so like in the Arctic, you could see actually it will cause large bias in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic. And in our model for Antarctic, if you look at B, actually it will take maybe 1,000 years to really come to get a good estimation and reduce all these bias. So this is something I think that quite important for the upcoming CMIP 7 and how we are going to define what is equilibrium and how we are going to deal with this. And I know some group already, when they doing the tuning of the model, when they see such large low frequency variability, they try to get rid of that. And for me, that I'm strongly against that, because I think that if that's internal variability, why should we get rid of that, right? It's not a right thing to do. Okay, so I briefly go through everything very quickly, and here is a summary for this talk. And first, I presented all this evidence about this multi-centennial, or you could say centennial to multi-centennial, because it also include 100 years. Variability is significant in prox data, in Holocene transit simulations, in control simulations, and also in sensitivity simulations. Of course, in these different simulations or different models, the peak period can vary and amplitude also can vary. They are not always the same. And then for these mechanisms, our first results that we think that is variability also originated from the AMOC, and it's a self-sustained intrinsic model within the Atlantic basin. So it's mostly driven by this salinity advection and vertical mixing feedback mechanisms, because if there's a positive feedback and negative feedback, because of this, you can have this oscillation. Otherwise, you can't really maintain this kind of oscillation. And in our model, this oscillation period is ranging from 200 to 300 years. And in other models, it also varies. And when we use this different CO2 level, and then we also found that this kind of variability actually is state independent. It also presents in the other warm climate, only changes in period and amplitude. And we also think there are some implications to this ECS estimation. Use shorter simulations may cause bias for this kind of estimation, especially for the higher latitude. So what I have presented this already also, tool is published, and the sensitivity will also soon be submitted. And if you are interested in the details, you also could read our paper. Thanks. I hope it's, time is not too much. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. The floor is open for questions. Are there questions from the audience? And there's no one raising. Let me just change to the gallery. Pasha, you've raised your hand. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, we can't hear you, Pasha.
Now it should work.
Oh, yes, I couldn't unmute first. Thanks for the nice talk. Maybe I missed it, but about model resolution. So be these different models you showed. So what's the effect of model resolution? Because you use different models and obviously some of them had different resolutions, but does it have any impact on the, say, this period or frequency of the variability? Thanks.
Yeah, I can't compare other model resolution, of course, because for the others, you can't only just consider their resolution, they also have different physics. But for the ECRs, as I showed that Klaus used 255 and we use 159, the oscillation is the same. Only the high resolution amplitude is larger, and they show the amplitude 0.7 degree, and we have 0.6 degree.
Okay.
I believe Gilles has a question.
Okay, Pierre, go ahead. Can't see you, but we can't hear you, Gilles.
Okay, now I think you should hear me.
Yes.
Yes. Hey.
It's a bit difficult when you're blind. It's really difficult. Thank you for this talk. It was really good. I was just wondering, you talked about the salinity anomaly, but this salinity anomaly is due to the transport, I mean, the dynamics of the hydrologic changes, I mean, precipitation. And moreover, I want to know if you intend to see if for the other model, you get the same salinity behavior. And moreover, if you even can see that salinity response in the data, just to be sure that the mechanism behind your oscillation is also imprinted in the data you get, if it is possible.
Yes, because here, when I talk about the salinity advection and the water commixture, it's an anomaly. Actually, they are the feedback to the mean salinity gradient change. Of course, this mean salinity gradient change could be affected by the precipitation or others, I mean, input from the atmosphere. And then this mechanism actually is not only in our ECS model, but also verified in the CESM model that one of our colleagues also working with CESM model. And also more important is that it's also already presented in a box model, very simple box model. So it's kind of theoretically already eigenvalue mode. It also shows this. So that's why we continue to study this, because we think there's also theoretical support on this kind of theory. Then that's something that then I think the further plan is just look at how this different forcing just try to damping or amplify this signal. Yeah.
All right. Are there
Thank you.
any questions? Chris, you've raised your hand.
I have. I was going to say, so if I remember rightly, the error that was coming into the estimation of the ECS using sort of the Gregory method was about 10%. Coming from that, how does that compare to, or I've heard it discussed that climate sensitivity itself is state dependent, and so will change depending on the temperature, and is that roughly the same value of sort of being 10%?
Oh yes, this percentage actually I didn't look at that. Okay, I don't have this here.
I think it was
maybe,
in
yeah.
two. I think
This
it was
one.
maybe, or somewhere you had some numbers. Oh no, it's in slide 20. You had some numbers, and I was just here sort of. So I was estimating that as being about 10%.
Okay, yeah, that's
error
10%,
on that value.
Yes, yeah, right. Yes, because like EC Earth, we already know that, I mean, officially that when we talk about our EC Earth models, climate sensitivity, it's 4.2 or 4.3.
Yeah.
But now when we have the long simulation, it's become 4. Yes.
Okay.
And what is your question?
Well, I think I was wondering,
Yeah.
I think I was wondering if how the impact of the climate sensitivity value changing as the world warms and the error in your estimate of it in the short time period, how they relate to each other in rough sizes. And it sounds like they're possibly the same sort of size.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Yeah. Mm.
Right.
I see that there's also some questions in the chat, or
I couldn't see one, but that's all right. I guess I have one question. After that, I would stop the recording and we can continue discussing a little bit.
Yeah.
So first of all, a comment, sorry. If you assume an AR1 process, so just a simple autoregressive process, I think that's what's called the Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, also relates to the Hasselmann model, then you can relate the variability to the equilibrium climate sensitivity. And in that sense, the variability would then have to be, or is supposed to be related to the climate sensitivity. But I guess from the simulations that you've done so far, I don't think it's directly possible to relate the amplitude and frequency changes to the ECS, since the model that you used always had the same ECS, right? Okay, that wasn't the question.
Okay, I'm trying to adjust your question. Okay.
No, my question was, to what extent the variability that you show that is really confined or driven by the North Atlantic and this oscillator mode, how coherent that is in space. So do you see this mode of variability driving variability, say, in other parts of the world? Or is it really restricted to the North Atlantic?
Yes, it's very strong in the, as we showed before, that in other latitude or in the tropics, you also see the signal, but it's not as strong as in North Atlantic. Then we think that maybe the signal propagate from the Atlantic to affect other region. But then we recently also discovered that it's not, if you do the correlation with AMOC and with the temperature somewhere else, you might not get very high correlation. Then we also need to think about that, how this variability affects, or atmosphere and also the climate, and also how we are going to interpret those signals recorded in the proxy data. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's quite a lot of things are still not clear. So that's why I want to just present this, because I think that why this multi-centennial variability is not studied before, only because we don't have this long simulations before. But now there's a possibility, especially after this survey recently that did by Christian, all these modeling groups is also willing to do more like long Holocene transient simulation. Then it's also possible, everyone together can, explore more things here. Yes.
Yeah, very good point. Because this would then set also the baseline expectation that on the proxy side, the time series should show some coherence in terms of their variability. And this is a very challenging test to run on proxy data due to age uncertainties and proxy differences. So yeah, it's good news. I would thank you for giving the presentation and everyone already for joining the discussion so far.